right now it is time to go on the line. Matter of fact, we are having a special in-studio conversation with a brother that is celebrating his latest compact disc, a brand new release called If You Really Want It. Grammy-nominated composer, vocalist, guitarist, pianist, and percussionist, and a Mack Ave recording artist, a brother who is badass and blind, talking about Raul Midon. Welcome to the Cool Jazz Countdown, my brother.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure, and thank you for allowing us to come into your personal studio today, man.
Oh, you're welcome.
Now, Raul, it's been a while since you and I have sat down to chop it up, so how you doing, man? How's life been treating you?
Great. It's busy, the new album. I just put out Badass and Blind last year.
Yeah, you're a busy man.
So it's
Grammy nominated.
Yeah, it's fun. It's been great. Really, I just came back from China for my first time, so it's been really wonderful.
Speaking of Badass and Blind, where were you when you got the call or received the news that you were Grammy nominated?
Right here in the studio, actually.
Nice.
I was here, my wife got the call from our publicist on the subway. She was screaming on the subway in New York that we had been nominated for a Grammy, and so we, and I thought, that can't be right. And I produced that album right here in the studio.
Wow. So it has to be a great feeling then to have something that you personally made from scratch.
Absolutely. I built it, I engineered it, I played on it, I sang on it, I got all the musicians. We did, of course, my wife and I. And it's, this is a new time these days, a new age where artists and musicians have to do a lot more for themselves.
Yes. So, Raul, for those who aren't fully aware of your abilities, those who may have been living under a rock for the last, quarter century or so or more, let's bring them up to date. You and your twin brother, born prematurely, lighting from the incubator, causing you both to lose your sight.
Right.
You both are thriving in your careers. You as a Grammy-nominated artist and your brother as a scientist with NASA.
Right.
Were these careers that you all saw yourself in as children, as you?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I think I've always thought I was going to be a musician. I think, I just was a musician. And at some point you think about, now I have to make a living as a musician. But that's what I always was, I think. As a kid, I was always interested in it. So that's what has always been.
Now, you have had several influences musically throughout your career. But talk to me about the influence of one in particular, producer Raul Midon. Yeah,
Raul Midon was one of the people that I played for when I moved to New York. And of course, I knew Raul from all the stuff that he's done, including work with Aretha Franklin and Ray Charles and Stevie Wonder. And I mean, the list goes on and on and on. Hall & Oates and the Bee Gees. And Arif was the first person that I worked with, and I was a session singer for a long time, so I ended up coming into contact with a lot of producers, and whenever the subject came up of whether they would work with me or not, it was always, but we would have to change certain things because, this is not what's on the radio, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And Arif was the first one that said, this is what we want to record, this is what we want. I want you to be yourself, and I want to record it, capture it in the best way possible. And I knew that's who I wanted to work with. Anyway, I mean, we were toying around with all kinds of different options in terms of producers, and I knew that Arif was the one. So.
Wow, incredible. So he pretty much took you where you were, or the sound that you had, and enhanced that, but didn't necessarily try to change it.
Enhanced it. We experimented with microphones so we could mic the guitar in a certain way, but yeah, absolutely. And then he said that's what he wanted to do, and that really in a way has set me on the exact right track, because I believe no matter what your level of success is, the best thing you can do as an artist to be yourself.
Oh yeah.
Because if it's not successful, at least you did something that you believed in, and if it is successful, then you're going to have to do it over and over again, and it's going to be okay because it's something that you wanted to do. So that's, for me, that's the whole point. You got to be yourself. You got to do what you want to do. You can't say, I got to do this in order to be successful, because most of the time it's not going to work out.
Now, Raul, you are definitely a special person in the fact that you are essentially a one-man band. When did you first stretch out to push yourself to not only play that one instrument live, but to get on stage and do that multitasking that you do now?
It started toward the end of my time in Miami. When I went to New York, and interestingly enough, part of it was just, practical. It was so hard to get people to rehearse in New York because everybody's hustling. Everybody's trying to go from one rehearsal to another. And I really didn't want people reading on stage, with a chart, their head buried in a chart. So it kind of started out that way, just like, let me just, kind of do this thing. I'd always been interested in playing rhythmically on the guitar and everything. But, that's what I love about this new album. It's exactly the opposite of that. It's a collaboration with an orchestra. So, but yeah, that multitasking and playing solo and all that started in New York, really, in a serious way.
And, it was in New York where you were playing as a session player, and you were moving in between genres. So 1 minute you're R&B, you're jazz.
Actually, that was in Miami.
Oh, that was in Miami?
Yeah, that was in South Florida. Most of my sessions work, quote unquote, that I did was in Florida. And that was, as many people know, a session musician is hired to do whatever. And so you end up doing commercials, R&B, Latin, whatever. A lot of Latin, though, because I was in Miami, so it was a lot of Latin pop.
A lot of Latin down there, for sure. And so with that, how do you feel about your music being labeled? Do you feel pigeonholed with that? Being that you do some
I'm not really. I mean, labels are pigeonholes by definition, but I have always just done what I wanted, and at first it was called pop and R&B, and now it's called jazz, and it's always been the same. So,
family, if you were just joining us, we are in studio today with guitarist, percussionist, vocalist, the man who does it all, Raul Midon. He has a brand new album called If You Really Want. And we want to know more about it, but we're going to do that in the second half of the program, so you stick around. More coming up in the second half with guitarist and vocalist Raul Midon here on the Cool Jazz Countdown. Family, we are blessed to be in conversation today with a Mack Avenue and Artistry recording label artist who is celebrating the release of his brand new album, If You Really Want, talking about the one and only Raul Midon. Raul, once again, thank you for opening up your space to us today.
Oh, thank you for having me.
And I think I told you this a few years ago, but I'll say it again. I was so very happy when I found out that you were now signed to the Mack Avenue recording label, because for the longest time, I have thought of what would be the perfect collaboration on album, which would be yourself and Stanley Jordan. Mm-hmm. Could you imagine that?
Yeah, it's funny that you say that, because I'm actually playing with Stanley Jordan next week.
Get out of here.
Yeah, I'm actually, yeah. So that's kind of funny that you say that.
I got my Negro Damas hat on. Well, let's get into this album, man. Album number 10 for you.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Pretty exciting. So what have you discovered or learned about yourself through these 10 albums?
Well, there's always something, when you're finished doing an album, you listen, you say, oh, I would have done this differently now. There's always, I think, I've become more confident in my eclecticism. Because the albums that I end up liking the most are the ones where I said the hell with, trying to make an album that sounds a certain way and just, make it a little more all over the place, which is what I like. That's, I want an album to be some kind of a journey. I don't want it just to be a thing that drones on, So, I don't know. That's kind of, and I've learned, how to produce. The last 3 albums I've produced and engineered myself. So that's including the Grammy-nominated one. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, most definitely, man. So if you really want, backed up by the Metropole Orchestra, has this been a lifelong dream of yours to perform with orchestra?
Absolutely, and to do with a great orchestra like that and a great conductor.
Vince Mendoza.
It doesn't get any better than that, really.
How did you come to meet Vince?
I met Vince years ago at a festival. I don't remember exactly. Somewhere in Europe, and I think he might have been working with, can't remember, a singer or something. And we said, we should work together. The typical things you say. And then we have some friends in the Netherlands, and they, my wife heard something about the orchestra, that Vince was working with the orchestra, and she said, why can't we get Raul working with the orchestra? Everybody's doing it, and so my wife kind of got the ball rolling, and then when Vince found out about it, he said, yeah, we should just do this, and we didn't have a label at the time. We weren't on Mack Avenue, and Vince, let's just record, and we'll worry about it later.
So take us through the recording process for this album.
Well, it started months and months before with, sending songs back and forth. It is 10 original songs, not the typical. Normally, a lot of times when you do these albums, people do tribute albums.
Right.
So this was, I wanted to do original songs, so we kind of went back and forth, and said, well, I like this one. I don't know. I don't think we should do this one. And then we started to talk about arrangements, and he would send me these mock arrangements that he did on Sibelius with, synthesized strings and synthesized horns, just so I could hear the arrangement.
Okay.
And eventually, we settled on 10 songs. I wrote 4 songs for the record, and then we decided to do some arrangements of songs that I had done before, like Suddenly.
Right, are those your favorites of your own songs?
Well, for the orchestra especially, Suddenly with the orchestra, I tell you, the one that just blew my mind was The Way Sunshine Came Out.
Wow, and that's my favorite song.
It just has this
new textures,
arc, and it builds all the way to the very end. I mean, usually something starts out soft, kind of gets loud, and then goes back down. This thing goes up and up and up and up all the way to the end of it. I've never been involved in something like that. It's just crazy how it builds.
Yeah. But that's definitely one of my favorite songs of yours. Let's talk about another one on here, God's Dream.
Mm-hmm.
How did that song come to be?
Well, it has some weird branches of inspiration, I want to say. Mm-hmm. I read a play when I was in high school that really had an influence on me. It was called J.B. by Archibald MacLeish.
Okay. And
it was about the Book of Job. It was I think it was written in the 50s. And it was the Book of Job in the Bible is basically asking the question, why do the innocent suffer? So Job has all of this stuff, the cows and and all this stuff. And essentially the question is, well, would he lose his faith if all of that gets taken away, right? And so in Archibald MacLeish's play, the devil makes a bet with God and says, hey, I bet you wouldn't have such a faithful, loyal servant if all this stuff got taken away.
Wow.
So in a sense, that song is about my idea of this sort of religious God as being, in a way, the idea of the creation of man was to create something, and it's another way of looking at the idea of free will, right? So, you know, the normal interpretation of that is, you know, create man, goes to the Garden of Eden, eats the fruit, the forbidden fruit, and therefore, instead of obeying God, has free will. And I look at that as actually the inevitable evolution of man, because being good it has no value unless you have the ability to be bad or the possibility of being bad. In other words, innocence is just that. But when you're good or when you're free and you do with that power something good or something noble, that's the real valuable. That's the real power. So that's, okay. I mean, that's a long way of talking about.
Raul Midon is dropping some knowledge in here today.
God's dream. That's that.
God's dream is beautiful, man. But then you also have a very powerful message, which is accentuated by the strings on the tune. If you really want, if you really want, you'll take your time.
Yeah, and you'll be yourself. I mean, basically, that's what that song is about. I wrote that. That was one of the songs that I wrote a long time ago, actually, and when I was thinking about moving to New York, and when I was thinking about, you know, just the journey so far of being a blind person, and how people say, well, you can't do this and you can't do that, and you know, and I'm like, yeah, well, you say that, but who says I can't, you know? And that's been my mantra for my whole life, you know. Now I have a recording studio that I operate myself, that, you know, as a blind person, and it's not a demo recording studio.
No, it's a nice, pristine,
it's a real professional level recording studio.
Yeah, this is amazing stuff in here that I know that I could not even think of even touching and moving and making music. But anyway, Raul Midon is here, brand new CD, incredible, If You Really Want. It is on the Mack Avenue recording label, featuring the Metropole Orchestre with conductor Vince Mendoza. It is in stores now, came out 2 weeks ago on September 14th or 16th?
14th.
September 14th. We do encourage you to go out there and check that out. Brand new music, beautiful. Raul Midon, backed up by orchestra. And we want to thank him for hanging out with us right here today on the Cool Jazz Countdown.
Well, thank you. And by the way, in the play, JB, Job doesn't get all his stuff back.
That's a life lesson, too.
Yeah. Just because you're good doesn't mean you get all your stuff back.
There it is.
So there you go.
Well, brother, you continue to be good, though.
All right, thank you.
Raul Midon right here on the Cool Jazz Countdown.
Pues en la noche, pues en la tarde, pues en la mañana, no me importa dónde esté porque te tengo dentro de mi corazón.